Oh, welcome everybody to Radicalized Truth Survives. My name is Heidi Cuda. I'm here with Jim Stewartson, High Fidelity, Sean Connor, three guys who will take my call at midnight in 3 different time zones. So we have a packed show news-wise. So let's jump right into Frontloaded, guys.
Frontloaded.
I just love that, Connor. Thank you so much for that. So we're going to start with Trump's last stand. I pulled a typical all-nighter after the day 1 January 6th committee hearings, and I just would like to guide everybody to Byline Times. I not only did a recap of what I thought were the most important elements from that hearing, and of course you guys may have seen our live discussion afterwards, but I interviewed Ruth Ben-Ghiat, Dave Troy, Paul Mason, Paul Nyland, and Ann Nelson, all friends of the show. And I encourage you to read what they said. This is a story far from over. And I think it's very important that we look at what these insurrectionists have been doing since January 6th to see where we need to shore up our democratic protections. So that's first and foremost. You guys want to comment, or shall I just keep moving?
Sounds good to me. Keep going.
Keep going.
Right on. Okay, so I also did a bit of a Twitter thread with our friend Martin Scheel, which is my 2 a.m. get down. He would like the DOJ, which I presume they are, to focus on money laundering and the insurrection, because as he said, this ragtag radicalized mob, which were actually pawns in this corrupt game, they got there somehow, some way by various financial opportunities. And our friend Martin Scheel, former IRS criminal investigator, retired, says that the people who finance the insurrection can actually be charged with money laundering. Sedition and money laundering, he said, go hand in hand. So what say you guys?
Well, in my Hellscape, we'll be talking about one Ron Watkins, who advertised that he was paying for people to go to the insurrection on December 21st, 2020, which was 3 days after the plan was hatched in the White House. So Ron Watkins would be an excellent person to fucking subpoena and find out where the money came from that he was passing around to white supremacists to go attack the Capitol.
I gotta throw something in here. What we are witnessing, it's a global business plot. We've already had a business plot, Smedley Butler back in the day. And I just want to remind people that, remember one of the billionaires behind, or actually at the time he was a millionaire, behind the business plot back in the 30s, was a guy. He said he would spend half of his fortune to save the other half, right? And if you don't think that the billionaires behind this are spending a shitload of money to stop progress, to stop a redistribution of wealth, that's all I got to say.
Well, if you have it, Sean, I did throw the Twitter thread in the rundown. I encourage folks to take a look at my timeline at Heidi_Cuda. The reason being that in the middle of the night last night, I did multiple threads that I hadn't gotten to yet because I had quite a week. But I do want to say that Marty, our friend, who always encourages everybody to follow the money, including Congress and the DOJ, does kind of draw a line. Jim, are you okay? Should I?
Sorry.
That's okay. This show is cool. We cough, we laugh.
This one here?
No, there was a thread. It doesn't matter, but this is it actually. Thank you so much.
It just comes in later.
Yeah. So what he points out is that it would not be unusual to look at the billionaires who financed Trump and who paid $1 million to go to his, candlelight inauguration dinner. It would not be a bad idea to check out some of these guys, and they can be criminally investigated for money laundering conspiracy under Title 18, 1956, parenthetical H. So I think that is going to be a very exciting opportunity for us to see some action. And then the last item I have for you, which is actually just a couple quick hits. A little birdie tells me that Monday nights, which is going to be tomorrow. When this airs, it should be tomorrow. Yeah, tonight. Whenever this airs, most likely Monday. A little birdie tells me that the January 6th Day 2 committee will focus on disinformation. Also, by the time this airs, Carol Cadwallader's verdict in the UK should be in. So please do join us for RadPod and Chill for that update. And last but not least, I was gratefully interviewed for Byline Radio today on my story on January 6th. And I just want to thank Jim and Hi-Fi. They know I get nervous before this stuff. Y'all took my calls. Y'all fed me information. I was able to pass it along to the listeners. And I'm very grateful for this team. And they also did a nice little promo for us. So that's it for Frontloaded.
Awesome.
Nice.
Right on. Let's get into word phrase of the week.
All right. Word phrase of the week this week. We're actually going to go a little deep. I was feeling intellectual. A word phrase doesn't happen often, but when it does, Anyway, our word phrase of the week this week is a Nietzschean term. It's will to power. All right. And will to power. This was a work that Nietzsche kind of left undone, and
dangerous word.
There's a lot of argument about it. For me personally, I view will to power as changing the self through the application of your will. If you want to learn something new, go out and learn it, apply yourself, right? But there's also a different definition of will to power, and unfortunately, this is the one that the Nazis co-opted. And we're seeing fascists globally co-opt today. And that is applying your will to alter your surroundings, to alter your reality. And that is what fascists are doing through their online campaigns, through their disinformation, through mind-fucking people. It is will to power to alter reality. And unfortunately, it seems to be working.
Yeah, the religious version of this is prosperity gospel, right? Where, if you just think positive thoughts, if you imagine the world with you, as the most powerful person in it, it will happen, right? And not coincidentally, Norman Vincent Peale, who was sort of the head of that, was Donald Trump's pastor.
And this was part of the process too, right? With the Nazis appropriating intellectual culture and the intellectualists, trying to
subverting it, twisting it,
taking Shakespearean culture, doing fake brain scans of Shakespeare's skull somehow, and saying that look, he's Aryan. And this was also in Nietzsche's life where he was drifting into madness, right? Through his syphilis, and it was right there's that line where people still took him very seriously, and people could easily misinterpret him. He wasn't nearly as clear. Yeah.
Yes.
Now there is something that is widely related to will to power in Nietzsche, and that was his thoughts on egoism. And egoism, and again, you say Nietzsche was going insane. Let's face it. But egoism, he thought, why shouldn't any person exert as much of their will as possible to alter their surroundings? Well, the problem with that is then that person's ego, will, whatever, overruns everyone around them, and that's not cool. So
we should do solipsism for one of these.
Ooh, let's do that.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Because solipsism feeds right into this, right? It's
wow.
That
it fits into
the center of the universe and are the only thing that matters.
Ties in with our totalism and everything else.
So I'm just here to say, like, y'all ain't alone in the fucking world. It's not just you and your little fucking fascist angry brain. There's a bunch of other people out here who are sick of your shit.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
As everyone who watches the show knows, that I am actually the center of the universe, so I don't know why they're throwing their
It's
shit. Anyway,
fucking true, man. Everybody just needs to get in orbit around hi-fi. Fucking,
Yeah.
life would be so much better.
get in formation, and away we go, man. That's all it needs.
That
So-
magnetic personality, yeah.
I just want to say one quick thing. As you guys know, I'm a cinephile. Pre-Code is my get down. And there's a Barbara Stanwyck movie where she's, a kid in a bum hellhole town. Her dad dies. He'd been sort of pimping her out to the locals in the bar that he owned. And she meets this one guy at the funeral who says, he starts quoting Nietzsche, and he says, "You got to learn to use men, use men." And Barbara Stanwyck's like, smoking a cigarette. And she's like, yeah. And the movie continues where she climbs up the ladder, goes to the big city, uses men. And all of a sudden at the very end, she realizes that, that's no way to live. But back in the early 30s, films were so dope. They were quoting Nietzsche. And I just wanted to contribute that. But yes, you guys are so right. People do interpret. Steve Bannon's an excellent example of somebody who interprets philosophy to his own angle and his own agenda, often distorting what it originally meant.
No, of course. I mean, as I've written about, Bannon is a trad. He's a traditionalist who follows this guy Julius Evola, who is the ultimate kind of syncretic force, where he pulled in all kinds of occult shit and fascism and Christianity and kind of mixed it all up and fed it to Hitler, among other people. He's Bannon's muse. Also the guy that Joe Rogan was promoting when I called him Steve Bannon's gimp and got banned.
Well,
God, that seems like so long ago.
Crap, right? The Kali Yuga bullshit.
Kali Yuga, yeah. Kali Yuga is what Rogan was promoting.
Yeah.
Kali Yuga it's a Hindu thing. It's a Hindu idea, but it's been appropriated by Nazis along with a whole bunch of Norwegian fucking symbols and, Nordic symbols, sorry. It's all just appropriating other people's stuff and putting it together into something that gives people an excuse to be eliminationists and genocidal fucking maniacs.
And
Go ahead, Heidi.
I was going to say, to Hi-Fi's point, we see how the day one January 6th committee hearings have been interpreted by the dishonored and failed President Trump's spokesperson as the Inquisition and a communist, attack. And that's just make-believe shit. That's not real. But we do have to keep an eye on how words and terms and philosophies are co-opted to bad end during a propaganda war.
Until I'm allowed to take thumb screws to Trump or put him in an Iron Maiden, it's not an Inquisition. All right, he can quit his fucking whining right
Classic Hi-Fi. Classic Hi-Fi. Oh my God.
All right, let's move on.
On that note, let's move on.
You guys ready for Live Matters? Here we go. Live Matters.
Yes.
Why does it matter? Why does it matter? Why hide Fidelity?
All right, let's talk
Why
about
does it matter, Hi-Fi? Why
does it matter? Well, this first one's kind of important. The internet wants to kill you.
It does. It fucking does.
It totally does. And this article was an article that came out in the AP. And what it talked about some of the platforms that these pathetic, heinous, mass murdering shooters come from. As we all know, in the Buffalo shooters manifesto, he specifically mentions being radicalized on 4chan.
And 8chan.
And 8chan. The other one I was thinking about from 8chan was the Houston Walmart shooter. He posted his manifesto, right?
So did Christchurch.
Christchurch shooter posted We have these platforms. The Tree of Life shooter posted his bullshit on Gab. Did Gab take it down? No, they fucking loved it, right? These people are sick. These people are twisted. These people are pathetic, and they need to be deplatformed. You can shout freedom of speech all you want, but the second you start talking about harming other people, you need to shut the fuck up. And this is why we need to do something about the internet, because the internet wants to kill you.
Well, hopefully in brief legal briefs, we'll get to something that we hope is moving in that direction.
Great.
Yeah.
That
I
would
mean,
be
look, these fucking websites are only there for radicalizing people. That is the entire point of 4chan and 8chan and Gab. All there.
Telegram.
Well, Telegram's more complicated because it does have, like, people do use it. The Ukrainians are using it and shit. They shouldn't be because it's fucking owned by the Russians. But they do, right? But we don't need that shit in America. We've got plenty of ways to communicate that don't have nothing to fucking do with Telegram. And in America, it is exclusively used to lie to people. Exclusively.
Yeah. Yeah, it
needs to go.
The internet moves at the speed of internet. Our legislation moves at the speed of white men in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, I quoted you on that on Byline Radio today on Adrian Goldberg's show. I said,
Nice.
and comparing it to the, moving at the speed of the 1800s. But even the platforms that aren't Telegram, we have problems with, and that's what makes this next story so interesting.
Next story is Silicon Valley suffers. So I made a pledge, and Jim remembers this pledge. I made this pledge in 2020, and I told all sorts of people, I'm going to nuke Silicon Valley because they are fucked up.
Metaphorically.
Well, with hi-fi, we don't know.
Yeah, you never know. Keep them guessing. Yeah, it's a metaphor. It's a metaphor. Anyway, no, what's happening in Silicon Valley right now is for the last 2 decades, there has been a massive influx of cash. Everybody's looking for the next Facebook. Everybody's looking for the next whatever, right? And the money was flowing like wine. Times were good. People were making huge salaries, except now all that money seems to have dried up and people are starting to pay more attention to the bottom line and all the funding is going away and companies are laying people off. Companies are stopping hiring and companies are offering lower and lower salaries. Now that may be commensurate with work from home, which is good. But then you think about it, companies are also saving money on corporate real estate. So is it really a trade-off? I don't know. But the big thing is these funds are drying up. And the question is not just, why is that happening? The question is, where was all that money coming from before?
I know.
I know too.
It's because half these fuckers are like life savings are in crypto. Seriously, like Silicon Valley is completely bought into this bizarre menagerie of crypto, Bitcoin, token. What the fuck are you even talking about? Right? Like they're all invested in this shit to their gills. And, all bubbles, they do what bubbles do. Every fucking time. That's what happens. And all that pretend money that's in their fucking bank accounts, it makes them feel like, big, rich white guys. Well, fucking it went away, half of it recently. Yeah. Because it's getting exposed as the house of cards that it always was. Right? And was always intended to be, by the way. And I find it funny that a lot of these fucking tech bros who totally knew that Bitcoin was just a LARP, right? Like, are now getting their asses handed to them because they forgot it was bullshit.
Well, again, will to power. They thought they were exerting their fucking will on the economy making themselves millionaires, billionaires, whatever.
Yeah.
For a while,
they forgot to get
Yeah.
out because they got
Yeah.
because they smelled their own farts for too long.
So to bring it to the lowest common denominator,
on the upside of all this, maybe, just maybe, there will be fewer white supremacist, misogynist, asshole, fucking tech bros at Burning Man this year. That would be awesome.
No way, man.
That's better than what I
still
had.
have enough money to get to the fucking desert. They're gonna they're gonna be partying their asses off trying
they'll be partying hard.
All the zeros they lost on their crypto account.
For anybody who doesn't know the details of what we're talking about, I refer you to episode 1 of Radicalized Pod Truth Survives, where Dave Troy broke it down for us. In addition, I have been always kind of zooming out, looking at Silicon Valley and the chicanery there, and so much of it resembles a Ponzi scheme, pyramid scheme anyway, so I think this was inevitable.
Yeah. And I also think they're losing a lot
of what?
Inevitably. Inevitable.
We'll fix that. We'll fix that in post, Heidi.
Let's keep in mind that Vladimir Putin is spending a shitload of money fighting a war in Ukraine right now, so that may have,
I thought about that too.
Well, the other thing is, look, inflation, which is intentionally being put on this fucking administration, is making money a lot more expensive, right? So it's when interest rates are down, when there's no inflation, when all this shit is humming along, like money is cheap, and so giving it out to people seems like a good idea, but not so much anymore, right? So it's and again, I just have to say this: they pull this play on Democrats every fucking time. They set it up so that the Democrats have to deal with this giant economic catastrophe.
Holding the
And
bag.
they blame the Democrats, and then they go back and start spending money again. Happens every fucking time, and we need to stop being loosey.
Yeah, I agree.
Charlie Brown, they're holding the football.
Well, they're Lucy. We're Charlie Brown. No, here's the thing about it.
I guess we can be Lucy. Sorry, my bad.
Actually, I'm going to be Snoopy and just kind of. I'm going to be Snoopy.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry. One thing about inflation, though, is these corporations across the nation are. They're having record profits. They're, billions and billions and billions of dollars. They're not paying taxes. I think it would behoove, Joe Biden, the commander in chief, to actually do a windfall tax on a lot of these petroleum companies, food processors, providers, suppliers who were found to be gouging, intentionally slowing supply chain. I think it might be prudent for him to tax the shit out of them and then hand that money out to people who can then spend it on these goods that are being overpriced and gouged.
I read an article about the IRS and preparing people like myself to small businesses are supposed to send out 9 million warnings to small businesses across the country. And I'm like, gee, these are, we're not a big company. We have 3 employees, and it's like we do our own taxes as a company. So chances of me fucking up are probably pretty big. But Jesus Christ, it's like get the fucking top of the top to pay their taxes, and then come after us.
Tax Elon fucking Musk, okay?
I know.
Tax Bezos.
Not looking forward to this month. Yeah, exactly. Not us. We get by, but good Lord, there's people that do a lot better than us.
Yeah, I'm doing my high five finger in the air.
Heidi, sorry.
I'm doing my high five finger in the air impersonation because I do want to say, now that he said the term windfall tax, I'm sure we're going to be seeing that in the media in a week or two. And just as we predicted when Hi-Fi was talking about food security and talking about what Putin was up to in the pilfering of grain from Ukraine, sure enough, what was Tim Snyder tweeting about? It's not to say he got it from the show, but these things then enter the zeitgeist. And he was threading about how Putin's going to short the world on food, which Hi-Fi was talking about 2 weeks ago. So good job, friend. You always, you surf in that data stream and information stream, and you really bring us very, very important information.
Just a producer's note, guys. That's 4 German words we've used already, so we can only use one more. before we get flagged.
Is
Scheiße.
inevitable a German word?
No.
I think that's French.
No, inevitable is Heidi's Strunken White bizarro world, where I learned if you don't know how to pronounce a word, say it loud. So I always like to mispronounce words loudly because it amuses me.
All right.
Wouldn't it be
Last
like
one.
inevitable or something?
Inevitable. Actually, Jim speaks French, which I'm so envious of because all I watch are French films, and I only know like 3 words, like fatigué. You know,
Je parle français.
I wish.
I do.
Next one. What do we got? One more high five?
All right, one more. Final story for the week. Please hold. China's on the line. And this story is well, it's fucking terrifying, frankly, and I'm gonna smile while I deliver it for you. Turns out that China, for the last 2 years, has been they've had their dirty fingers all up in a vast majority of America's telecom companies, and they were able to access the communications inside our telecoms by exploiting vendors, people who make routers and switches like Cisco and Avaya, people like that. They were exploiting old vulnerabilities in software that our telecom companies were running, and they were able to dig in layer through layer through layer to the point where they could actually capture audio of people's telephone conversations, who you called, who you're speaking with. If they wanted to target you, they certainly well could. And we don't know if they were able to record those calls and save them elsewhere. But I would like to point out that that is data about people. And if I can listen to what you're talking to on the phone to your significant other or your parents or friends or work, I know how to mess with you because you are exposing your vulnerabilities to me. Again, we don't have any regulation that says you must patch your software. We don't have any regulation that says companies are liable for cybersecurity breaches like this. We don't have any regulations that say this is bad and it needs to stop.
Right.
So it's terrifying. Right. And nation states are doing it. Not only nation states, there are individual actors who do the same sort of thing. I happen to know some of them. But this is a very, very serious issue.
Yeah, and like I always say, the private life is dead, but it shouldn't be. And, I look at News of the World and the News Hack, and I look at the people who did not go to jail for their harms that they did on the people that they hacked. And clearly we need some regulations.
I'm going to take a pound of flesh out of Rupert Murdoch for Amy Winehouse.
Yeah, he killed Amy Winehouse. He did. Yeah. She did not know who in her close circle was selling her out, and it turned out it was nobody in her close circle. It was Rupert fucking Murdoch.
Yep, they were hacking her medical records. They were hacking her telephone. It drove her nuts, and eventually she took her own life. And
alcoholism took her own life, but nevertheless.
But
you
got demons.
What was she medicating, right?
Yeah, exactly. She should have just been playing jazz clubs. Oh my God! Imagine the music she'd be putting out today.
Yeah, fuck you, Murdoch. Fuck you.
Beautiful,
running
person.
Yeah. She's always behind me. You can see her right behind me. Mm-hmm. There's Amy always right over my shoulder, like the beautiful angel she is. Let's get some brief legal briefs on up in here.
Brief legal briefs.
All right, guys, quickly today, we're talking about 8 lawsuits that were filed against Meta. And the reason for that scared Heidi off, I guess. The reason... No, this is great. The reason that this is so important is because, as we predicted a few shows ago, what I was hoping that they would do, and this means that they've been in the process for a while, is going after the algorithm itself rather than the platform. And if you can go after the algorithm, then you can claim defective design, which is exactly what they've done, and a failure to warn. So the product itself is flawed, the product being the algorithm, not the platform, which is very exciting, and it gives them a shot to get around 230 is the way it stands now. And here's just a little This was the most exciting part. I sent it to you guys in the chat because I was so excited. And this is a shot. And the other thing that's exciting about this is they filed in 8 different states. Now, why did they do that? Well, there's going to be some judges that are going to be amenable to this and some aren't. So if we file across a variety of different states, hopefully one of the judges will see this as the way that the plaintiffs see this and allow us to go forward, hopefully setting precedent. So that's your brief legal briefs. We're looking at algorithms as products. Products can be faulty and have defective design and a failure to warn and push these things forward.
This makes me super happy. Meta needs to have their feet held to the fire. I would also like to add on just a little bit about Mrs. Sheryl Sandberg, right?
Okay.
Apparently, she's under investigation by the board of Meta for misusing company resources. She is stepping down as from her VP position, which, hey, great, that's awesome. Except she's still going to stay on the board. If it's up to me, she wouldn't be anywhere near that company. Just wanted to add that.
Yep.
Well, I mean, I think people hear the word algorithm, and I don't think they realize how much this has been something that's been weaponized against humanity. I'm sorry, there's no other way to look at it.
And they've been successful at calling the algorithm, holding it sort of separate or a part of the platform, and it's not. It's a thing that you can construct and develop. It's got different attributes than a pen or a phone, but it still is a product that's created.
Yeah.
So
well, how much is this like, Sean? How much is this like smoking? Do you just remember how we knew, but it was 40 fucking years to do anything about it? This feels like addiction. It feels harmful. We know it's harmful.
Very, very similar. Yeah.
It feels so much like big tobacco.
And it feels like healthcare, the sector. A lot of these products that come out, these devices, sometimes they're made to heal or to help someone where there's an actual injury. Oftentimes there's not an injury that exists, so they have to create an injury and then start selling the cure. That was the case in another, and it's sad, but sometimes they call these people revolving door patients, where they go in, they get some medication, they know that their product is gonna be obsolete. They build in obsolescence, so that in 2 to 3 years they'll have to go in and get that medical device fixed, so that they can have a sort of recurring revenue stream. And it's really quite frightening. Yeah.
Yeah, and Hellscape, I'm going to talk a little bit about another platform that has allowed itself to be weaponized by algorithms, which is Twitter.
Yeah.
Let's get you up here.
In fact, Twitter is, arguably responsible for the big lie being propagated, and therefore has questions to answer about what they knew leading up to 1/6.
All right, let's get into it.
Jim Stewartson's Hellscape. Oh, fuck.
Genius.
God, that thing is scary.
I've come to absolutely love it. I've come to love it. I've grown to love it. It's so Hellscape.
Yeah, it is. Let's go, Jimbo. You got it.
All right, here we go. All right, so I'm going to start with bad news, because that's who I am, because I'm that guy.
That's why we love you, bro. That's why we love you.
But today, hopefully, I'll flip the script a little bit by the end. So the bad news is, first of all, Mike Flynn's still doing his thing. Can you pull up that first article?
Yep. Sure. Give me a sec. Here we go.
So, as I have mentioned many times, Mike Flynn is the guy who is responsible for QAnon. No matter what bullshit you hear about there, stories about, weird people in South Africa or whatever, none of that is true. Mike Flynn set this fucking psyop up from the beginning, and he's still doing it. Mm-hmm. Now, I was watching it extremely closely leading up to the election and to 1/6. And on election day, I said, RIP Q, Q is dead. It's moving on to election interference. And sure enough, that's exactly what it did. So on election day, I said, literally, mark my words, this RIPQ, it's over. Got a little more complicated than that. I won't get into it, but I recommend looking at the story because QAnon was not done. It had a couple of other plans. One of them was to set up on Twitter, and some friends and I managed to make sure that fucking didn't happen.
That's right.
But at the same time, they set up the big lie, and they used a guy named Ron Watkins as the sort of central hub for it, and we'll get into that in a minute. But the other bit of bad news that I wanted to point out is, can you pull up number 2, Sean? Is Mike Flynn's brother, Charles Flynn, is in India, is in fucking Nepal, is all over Asia, really, really going out of his way to try and incite a war with China. There's no other way to look at this fucking guy's, behavior. Not only that, after going into India, which has some serious problems of its own right now, he decided to set up joint military exercises against China in India in October. Mm. Now, what the fuck? Are you insane? Like, I'm sorry, I'm not like in the
yes, he is. Oh,
I'm not in the Joint Chiefs or anything, but setting up a potential conflict with China the month before the election, and you're the guy, by the way, who made sure the Capitol wasn't defended on 1/6, and then lied to the Inspector General about it. Like, why in the absolute fuck is this guy in charge of anything, much less the largest fighting force we have, which happens to be what would respond to a China crisis, which he appears to be trying to create. So somebody in the military needs to get their fucking shit together. Hi-Fi, do you have something?
Yeah, actually, I try to bring up data points that back up my premise that this is a global business plot. And one of the data points that I do need to talk about is Narendra Modi. Now, the BJP is an ultra-nationalistic Hindu party. However, Narendra Modi has worked with Cambridge Analytica in the past. If you look at Dr. Emma Bryant's propagandamachine.tech, you'll see that Cambridge Analytica and SCL ran operations in India. Not only that, but if you look at the Delhi riots of 2020, in which 56 people ended up dead, a lot of that was stoked on Facebook, right? Mm. And you're seeing the same thing that's happening now, just with different religions. I mean, right now we're seeing Christianity in America going after agnostics, atheists, gay, anyone different, right? Same thing going on in India. The Hindus are going after the Muslims hard as fuck, and they are killing people and they are beating people in the streets. They're using this tension to destabilize nations and bring about fascism. That's why India is important.
And they're going after Muslims in the process, right?
Oh yeah,
which as we know is the favorite target of the Flynn's, right? So bunch of bad news. What the fuck is this guy doing? Why are these brothers still out there doing this shit? The good news, can you pull up number 3, please? Is the committee seems to know what's up.
Yeah.
In a way that honestly I was very, maybe not surprised, but very pleased. That because they did a few things that I think were really important. First of all, it was produced really well, and by that I mean it wasn't produced at all. Yeah. It was just a fucking straight committee hearing with really good speakers and just evidence.
Agreed. And yeah, it was written really well. It wasn't produced, but it was written really well. Yeah.
Yeah. So Liz Cheney, who voted with Donald Trump 93% of the time, laid waste to the Trumps, gave Ivanka and Jared 5 seconds each to, dump all over Trump, and it was awesome. Hang on a second. But they also zeroed in on this meeting on 12/18. So pull up number 4. So this is a series that I think everybody has probably seen at this point, that I wrote with Gal Suburban based on a bunch of her research, and I added mine around this meeting on December 18th, which involved Mike Flynn and Rudy Giuliani and a parade of horribles. And Liz zeroed right in on this meeting, because the day after this meeting, if you scroll down a bit, there we go, you see this tweet from Donald Trump the day after saying, big protest in DC on January 6th, be there, will be wild, right? That was the moment, and the reason why the piece is called, the insurrection was Plan B, is because it was Plan B. They agreed to it in the fucking White House, right? So, which brings me to the hopium. So let's get to hopium. So I wrote this other piece.
Yes.
So I'm not going to go through the whole thing. What's that?
That's just hope. Yeah. She said she loved this piece. I agree.
Love this piece.
There are certain things that have been going on that lead me to believe that there is some coordination between the administration, Congress, and the DOJ in the project to save democracy. I have not been optimistic about any of this, and I'm still not. Like, I have not lost my cynicism in any way. However, the DOJ did, and it's a big deal, roll up the entire leadership of the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers on seditious conspiracy charges, which, is exactly what they should have been charged with, but is a big fucking deal. There hasn't been very many of those, right? Now, what I think is going to happen, or has already happened already in the first one, is that Mike Flynn and Rudy Giuliani and Donald Trump, who are in the White House, who are connected to the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys, who set up the plan to use the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers, who ended up in stacks going up into the Capitol to fucking hang Mike Pence, right? Like, those people were charged with seditious conspiracy. If they were, then the people who were directing them have to be as well, right? I mean, at a minimum, Congress is saying, listen, DOJ, look, here's seditious conspiracy charges on these white supremacist militia violent people. And here are the people in the fucking White House who weaponized them to attack the Capitol. That sounds to me like the recipe for everybody who was in that meeting being charged with seditious conspiracy. I'm not sure what else comes out of that particular.
I do have one thing I'd like to put in there. As we all know, Dakota Adams, who was the son of Stewart Rhodes, he pointed out that Mike Flynn and Eric Prince were the direct superiors of Stewart Rhodes when it comes to the Oath Keepers. And I did not hear Eric Prince's name, and I really hope I hear that name soon coming out of the
Yeah, I didn't hear Roger Stone's either, which may be interesting. Gal Suburban pointed that out. And listen, Roger Stone is the biggest snake on planet Earth. And if he can save himself a couple of years out of prison, he will throw all these motherfuckers under the bus. So it's very, very interesting to see that Roger wasn't focused in on, because, frankly, he was one of the most visible people in the plot.
Liz Cheney said.
And then I wanted to, a final piece of good news, a very short one, number 6, if you would, Sean. What we have right here is a bunch of fucking Nazis getting arrested. Woo! And anytime we can see that is a good fucking day. So these are Patriot Front, which are a bunch of Nazis that have Russian money backing them, that get in fucking U-Hauls and go to places like the Pride event in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, which is where this is. They go in U-Hauls and they get their little Nazi signs and they get themselves all geared up to go fucking, go show their how supreme they are. But these motherfuckers ended up on their knees in a fucking field, getting arrested as they should. And thank you, Coeur d'Alene, for your service. We are grateful.
Very good. Did you want to play this? Or
Sure. It's just 11 seconds long.
Yeah, I love watching Nazis getting busted. Do it.
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
This is what happens when mommy and daddy don't love
people
you.
laughing at them, which is the best part.
I'll laugh.
Yeah, there's some laughter. Yeah, it didn't pick up the internal audio, but that's good. It's some good hopium right there. Yep.
So, that's not even hopium, right? That's real.
Well,
these fucking Nazis got arrested before they were able to spread their propaganda, and that is how you do it. You don't wait around for them to be out there with their fucking swastikas. You do a little bit of like actual police work and shut that shit down. And thank you. And I'm shocked to say this. Thank you, Coeur d'Alene Police, for getting that done.
Thank you. Fantastic.
Yes, we don't think of Idaho as the bastion of progressive liberal values, particularly when so many retired members of law enforcement head there. But I'm so excited because we did not have to endure the visuals of these guys waving their flags and harassing people out to celebrate the freedoms that we appreciate in this country. So more of that, please.
I would just like to say congratulations to Idaho. They now not only have the first best potatoes in the world, but they put a bunch of other potatoes in fucking prison. So good job.
Well done, high five. Okay, well that was a hell of a hellscape, and I gotta say, just for my own heart, I so appreciate how you bring the truth and reality and the things that we need to be focused on and warned about in our times. But I also like to celebrate where we're getting things right and where we genuinely can feel some hope. So I just wanted to let everybody know that, of course, you guys know that we have a synchronicity and a serendipity with our friends in the UK with Byline Times. And so we are bringing in as a special impromptu live guest, Adrian Goldberg, who was kind enough to interview me for Byline Times Radio this morning, Byline Radio. And we talked specifically about January 6th. And I incorporated a lot of what I learned from you guys. And so we'd like to bring Adrian to kind of do a recap of that and to also talk a bit about what Byline Radio is focused on. I'm so happy to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. Yeah, I had such a great time. I had such a great time on your show this morning. It meant so much to me that you took that hour with me. And you're looking at the two guys who kind of always talk me off the ledge and take my calls in the middle of the night or early morning. They're my right and left arm, respectively. Hi-Fi, who's an incredible data guy. He's amazing with data research. He really loves to just sort of dig in. And Jim Stewartson, of course, who is somebody who came out of the gaming world, one of the pioneers of augmented reality gaming, used for fun and to engage people. And then, 2 years ago, he saw that something that he'd helped pioneer being weaponized to be very harmful. And what we talked about today was kind of the manifestation of that. All those people that showed up didn't brainwash themselves. So we thought we would just have a chat sort of about why, I guess, our brothers and sisters in the UK care about what happened on the 6th, and then anything that you can tell us about your show.
Absolutely. Well, I guess we care for a number of reasons, don't we? Obviously the United States is the West's superpower, I suppose. They're the one that militarily the United Kingdom is aligned with, and old-fashioned as it may seem, countries like the UK do look to the US, I think, for leadership in terms of democracy and to set standards in some way. And I think within that, of course, there are many caveats and questions that are raised by that kind of statement. But I think you know where I'm coming from when I say that.
Yeah.
And I think the arrival of Trump.
Yes, Trump.
I should warn you. It's 11:30 UK time in the evening. I've been out to a gig tonight. And I've had a couple of pints, so forgive me.
Nice. You're perfect for our show.
So it's perfect.
A very good band with the worthy name of an all-female band called P. Ness. Careful how you say it. They're great.
That's exciting. I'm wearing my Pine Avenue shirt, which is my son's band.
P. Ness, is that a lake in Scotland? Is that...
Yeah, just south of Loch Ness. Yeah.
A very small.
Very small lake. It's more like a pond, really.
Isn't it? Before we move on to serious stuff, isn't it so wonderful to go see live shows again? I mean, God, I was just in downtown Pomona to go see my kids' band, and out of every venue, music pouring out of just every bar, and it felt just so good because, of course, I missed that.
Unless you're Boris Johnson, because he didn't, hold any regulation, right?
Yeah, he didn't miss out on anything.
Okay, we're having parties, kids. Let's go.
They were just work events with beer and champagne and wine. Normal
over
stuff.
So one thing I wanted to say is the Trump administration, at some point, they got their act together and they actually were putting out a report. And a report just came out that was actually initiated during his quote unquote administration that showed that Brexit was the very beginning of the information war. And that should not surprise anybody, right? We've been living in this crazy time where those of us who are paying attention and not brainwashed see this information war, and many people seem quite unaware. And obviously with Byline Radio, this has got to be some of the focus of what you're doing.
Absolutely. No, you're right, Heidi. And of course, as well as the kind of the general thing about the United States, this rise of populism that we've seen around the world, but particularly in the West and particularly in the United States and the UK, the sense that Johnson is in some sense a mirror image of Trump. And we know from the work of people like Peter Jukes at Byline Times and Carol Cadwallader, who's currently awaiting the verdict of a libel case on another issue. We know that organizations like Cambridge Analytica were seeking to influence the UK elections. So certainly the referendum in 2016, there is evidence of attempts, whether successful or not is a whole other question, but attempts to influence the Brexit referendum. Also evidence of attempts to later on to influence Scottish elections, for example. So from that point of view, there's definitely a resonance. And of course, the way in which Johnson has clung to power is only a notch less disreputable than Trump's activities.
I mean, it is a notch. I mean, he doesn't seem to go like out of his way to do things for Putin, right? Like our guy. Our guy was just straight up, like on the wrong team. At least Bojo seems to sort of bounce around in amoral land as opposed to.
I mean, what was interesting pre the Russian invasion of Ukraine is the extent of sponsorship by Russian oligarchs of the Conservative Party and support. Mm-hmm. You may be aware of a UK newspaper proprietor, Evgeny Lebedeva, who is the son of a KGB agent, and we are told that the UK Secret Services were very wary and warned Johnson about the risk of giving Lebedev, making him a lord, elevating him to the House of Lords, and Johnson overruled that. Now, I'm not suggesting that Evgeny Lebedev is in any way a stooge of Putin, but he did support the invasion of Crimea, for example.
Mhm.
So, you know, I think you're right. I don't think Johnson necessarily does Putin's bidding, but there are real questions to be asked
Of
about the
course,
links between the
yes.
Conservative
No,
Party and Russia and oligarchs and so on. Without
of
doubt.
course.
Here's the network I've been wondering about, and it seems to have kind of been blown over, and I don't really understand why. Is Prince Andrew, his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, the money laundering on the Isle of Jersey, the terrible child abuse problem on the Isle of Jersey, the Isle of Man tax havens, right? It all seems like there's, I mean, let's face it, London is called Londongrad, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
right, for a reason. You got the same Deutsche Bank problem that we have, you know?
And what is there any movement that you see in Parliament to like take this crap out? It's time to take the garbage out, I think. Is it happening over there?
When David Cameron was elected Prime Minister, he did promise that these shell companies, which allow oligarchs and others to hide their identities, to disappear, you know, and just kind of launder money through various means, Cameron promised to ensure that the beneficial owner of each company would effectively have to declare themselves and be brought to light.
Yes.
It never happened, you know.
Yeah.
And Cameron, as a kind of liberal, socially liberal, conservative prime minister, promised that. Whether he was nobbled, whether he just didn't see it as sufficiently as a priority, but the opportunity to find out who the beneficial owners of these shell companies are was missed. And that was a bad miss, you know. And recently there's been talk of Parliament, and there's been some movements towards that, but you know,
it's a tough one, right? Because for the public, it doesn't feel like the biggest issue in the world, right?
No.
But you know, it really is, and so it's difficult, you know, when you've got so much money and influence going against that kind of thing, and you just don't have that kind of visible public backlash to it, because it's kind of technical, and like no one just cares very much. I feel like we need to find a way to highlight why it's so important, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
I think we should. I think. Oh, good.
No, I was just going to say, on the Byline Times podcast, I remember interviewing a Conservative MP recently, just at the time of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and asking why so many of these measures hadn't been enacted despite various promises. And it was exactly what you've said, Jim, that it was a very hard sell to the electorate. You know, they're saying, what about the cost of living?
Yeah.
What about other issues that are prominent at the day? And the question of shell companies is never at the top of the list of the public's concern.
And interestingly, though, as our friend Fred Wellman said, people who think they just only care about their pocketbook aren't going to like voting their pocketbook under authoritarianism. So I am so glad you jumped into our show for a minute. I'd really love you, before you leave, just to tell our viewers what Byline Radio is about and what they can expect in the future.
Absolutely. So Byline Radio is an offshoot of the Byline Times, and the Byline Times is an independent progressive news source in the UK. We feel that too much of the media in the UK is owned by our own kind of oligarch, people who don't necessarily have any long-term connection with our country, people who are living offshore and taking advantage of beneficial tax arrangements not to pay full taxes in the UK, and who are pressing, in our view, a damaging sort of right-wing agenda. So Byline Times is funded by ordinary readers, and as an offshoot of that, I brought to them the idea of doing a podcast, and now Byline Radio, where we go live via Twitter Spaces, and just flying a flag for fearless, independent, progressive journalism.
It's so wonderful to be a part of it.
I just have to say, from an outside perspective, there's not many places where I can go read stuff that matters, that's new, and isn't afraid of something, right? Because it's just true that all kind of mainstream media has these pressures from different angles, And it's been, it's really, and I'm not just saying this because of Heidi and all that, genuinely grateful to have Byline Times around because I learned stuff from
Yeah,
it.
no, thank you. And just to say, I mean, we had a very particular problem in the UK, in that we had phone hacking going on, and
Yep.
some terrible intrusion into people's private lives. The UK government commissioned an inquiry headed up by a High Court judge called Brian Levison, called the Levison Inquiry, and that was pretty good about bringing to light the failures of regulation of the press
Yeah.
in this
Yeah.
country. But there should have been Levison 2, and Levison 2 was going to look at the link between politicians and the media and the police in our country, in the UK. Now, that was legitimately put on ice as various court cases went through, and it could not be enacted until these court cases had been cleared. But really, that was going to go to the heart of what is rotten and corrupt in the state of Britain. And by the time Levison 2 was due to be initiated, Theresa May was Prime Minister, having real problem with her Brexiteers, and these right-wing tabloids and right-wing newspapers in the UK were really vehemently against Theresa May. And so the story goes that in order to buy off the newspapers effectively to ensure that they supported her, Theresa May said she would drop Levison 2.
Wow.
So this sinister link between police, politicians, and the press was never enacted. So we've never had Levison 2, and yet we can see all the same forces, all the same dark forces really at work, and they have never been brought to light. And it didn't do Theresa May any good. She ended up being booted out anyway and replaced by Boris Johnson, who will happily do the bidding of his paymasters in the right-wing press.
That's right. Well, I just want to say, all these years in media, I tapped out of corporate media a decade ago, and there's no place I feel more at home. Of course, this show here, but at Byline Times, founded by a playwright and a punk frontman. There's nothing better. Those are my people. And Adrian Goldberg, we're so glad that you joined us. Thank you again for having me on the show. And we look so forward to continuing this wonderful serendipitous relationship across the pond here.
Great to talk to you guys. Thank you. Stay well. Cheers.
We are thrilled to bring in our special guest, Todd Helmus from RAND. We're very, very excited. We have Todd, who's a behavioral scientist, who's helped produce and co-author some very, very important reports that deal with the subjects we tackle in this show, subjects such as domestic extremism, Russian propaganda. And Todd, please tell our viewers a bit about yourself and the work of your team.
Well, thanks for having me here. Yeah, I'm a clinical psychologist by training, though that's been a while. At RAND, I do a mix of, like you said, disinformation and extremism work. Back before right-wing extremism was in vogue, I did ISIS work, and before ISIS was in vogue, I did Al-Qaeda work. So I've been at this business for a little while on the extremism side. And then I did some work in Afghanistan and came back and started working on Russia stuff. So those are my two main areas. I think the thing we're going to talk about today is this work that we did interviewing some 32 former violent extremists.
Yes, exactly.
How they got in, what led them in, and how they got out.
Absolutely. We may as well just jump in right there. Obviously, I'm sure you saw the day one hearing. And as Jim always says, people don't radicalize themselves. They don't brainwash themselves. What can you tell us some of the highlights or lowlights of this report? And then also maybe offer your observations on January 6th.
All right. So a couple of things. We think of this, we think of our report as sort of, we think about it in three different phases. What were people like before they got radicalized? What was the process by which they got themselves into these groups? And then how did they get out? Because a lot of the guys and women we talked to got out. So, on the background side, several factors related to these. And I should note that what we did was we interviewed, I think, 32 former violent extremists. We interviewed family of another 4 violent extremists. Most of these were right-wing. eight of the 32 of the 36 were Islamic extremists, but most were of the white supremacy variety. And what we find is these folks had a lot of issues before they even found themselves in an extremist group. Most had some financial problems. Maybe 2/3 of them had problems. Yeah, I don't know. They had problems keeping a job. They have financial issues. And a lot of them, their work, they ended up finding work that that tied them to the extremist groups that they ended up joining. But certainly this idea of trouble sort of succeeding in life sort of helped lead them there a little bit. A bunch of them also had mental health issues in the past, and we didn't do like a DSM diagnosis or anything like that. But we did ask them, did they experience any of these problems? And at least half of them did. Problems related to depression, anxiety, learning disorders, things like that. And certainly at a rate above what you'd normally find in a US general population. There's a lot of studies that articulate these things. So that's an issue. And then the other piece about their background is social problems, just problems getting along, problems connecting with other students in school. One kid talked about the fact that he was being beat up and bullied in school. And at that sort of very moment, when he's sort of at his weakest point and he just got bullied, some kid sits up next to them and says, "Let me tell you about this group I'm in." So
I'm curious, did you look at ASD by any chance? Autism spectrum disorder?
No, but we didn't have a real system. More the way we did this study is we drew this study off of suicide research. And what suicide research does is it goes back to people, often because people commit suicide, you can't talk to them, but you can talk to their family members. And it was very open-ended. It's like, tell us your story.
Sure.
And so people told us their story. And as they're telling us their story, and we're not trying to pull things out of them, they're just saying stuff. As they're telling the story, they're talking about these issues that they've had in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Because the vulnerabilities you listed are absolutely there. There's also, I've on the kind of mental front, neurodiversity seems to be a vulnerability as well. I happen to be neurodiverse myself, and it is a vulnerability to undue influence.
Interesting.
Unfortunately,
it's not surprising. I mean, what you get, the upshot of all of this is a lot of these kids are struggling. It's not the most.
Well, a lot of people on the spectrum are bullied.
Squared away people are getting sucked into this. It's those who are challenged. And part of the reason I think that is something I'll talk about next, which is sort of the radicalization pathway.
Yeah.
This notion of building a connection, making friends, right? Being at a cookout with guys. Just simple things that a lot of people take for granted, these people struggled with. And now all of a sudden they find themselves in that cookout. They find themselves being connected and being accepted and embraced. And it really, I could not imagine myself withstanding that kind of moment myself either, right? If I could find myself that struggling, but then embraced by these people in a loving way. Now they're hate groups, but they're still embracing these people, and it's powerful.
It sounds very much like gang warfare, like the Crips and the Bloods. When I first moved to LA, I'd written a book with Ice-T, and he talks about dad might be in prison, mother might be getting loaded, no food in the refrigerator. You've got these guys on the street, and they're going to love you, and they've got the money, and they're going to help you. And it sounds very similar to that kind of embrace of belonging.
So how do you disrupt these radicalization paths? How do you interrupt people being dragged into these cults, being turned into extremists? What is there a recommendation that you found?
Well, there's no easy recommendation. One thing I'll say is we found a couple observations about how people found themselves in these groups. And I just mentioned before about the background factors that might have made them vulnerable. So a couple of things. One is we saw in half the cases, people had what we call this reorienting event, where, they experienced something really bad happen to them. And that bad thing led them to sort of open their eyes to the truth as they were to see it. And you see this a lot in how people convert to religions. People don't convert to religions because everything's amazing. Oftentimes they convert to religion at this sort of nadir in their lifetime. So we had this story from this guy who he told this long story about how he was going to finally make it out of his parents' house. And he was moving to the big city in Minneapolis or whatever city it was. And there was this long prelude to everything that he was doing up to the point. And he got there and he got a job and everything was looking great, but it all fell apart. And he had to move back to his mother's house. And as he tells it, he just saw the world. All of a sudden that led him to see the world in a very different kind of way. And it led him to realize that that this group that had been trying to reach out to him before was the real deal. And that's what sucked him into that. And then real quickly, we also know a lot of these groups experience propaganda. So that you just don't obviously join these groups without having never heard of them or seeing their ideology, right? So you get exposed to the ideology. For some, it's books. For others, it's on the internet. Obviously, everybody who joins is Googling this shit. And then for another set, it's music, right? So right-wing hate groups, big into music. There's festivals, there's concerts that are just focused on just hateful music. And so that sort of brings people in as well. And then it's what I mentioned to you before, this notion that people get accepted once they join, right? They go to the first cookout and they're embraced and it's like their eyes open, like, wow, I've been missing this the whole time. And so now they're in. So we see those sort of different factors. Now, it's hard going back to your question now, how do you intervene in this stuff? I mean, it's hard, right? You can't, certainly we know that the platforms want to remove some of this propaganda off by limiting access to it. But it's hard. They've not been very successful at it. And there's certainly more than just online stuff. So that's a challenge. You're certainly never going to get everybody that you can't intervene with people just who have negative aspects going on in their life, right? Who have had that sort of reorienting about it, because everyone has those from time to time. So I don't know. There's no easy way to think about intervening. We do have recommendations that we talk about. One thing we know is that being exposed to the other can be really powerful. So if being exposed to African Americans as a white guy or a white woman probably has a really big role in whether or not you're going to hate them or not. And my view is and there's evidence to suggest this, that being exposed to people like that is going to really limit your ability to just hate them because you know them. So finding ways to expose people to diversity is really valuable. Recognizing that people who are in these groups are struggling, and I guess this goes into how you bring them out, which is a different question. So I'll save that for a little bit. But and there's also, of course, online interventions where people who Google, like, how do I join KKK? They kind of get exposed to videos and other content that help lure them out from organizations like Moonshot that place basically ads for people who Google how to join KKK. So there's a lot of ways you can try to work that system. And then, of course, some of it goes way back when we talk about some interventions that you could probably do in high school and junior high that might help limit the ability of some of these people to join.
Wow, that's so good. We haven't talked about that very much. When you look at, before we get into how they themselves got out, when you look at January 6th with your knowledge as a behavioral scientist and the knowledge that you've gleaned from the work and the reports that you do, what kind of do you see?
Well, I know that a lot of them, we know there's evidence that suggests that a lot of them had financial issues in their backgrounds as well. Yeah, I don't know. I've not done research on that group. I don't know how they compare or don't compare to this. I can only speculate in a very broad kind of way. My guess is that January 6th, and the community surrounding it, the QAnon community and other communities like that, provide their own sort of, belonging, sense of connection that people have.
Yes.
And, we know that the pandemic has not been helpful in this. People have been lonely, people have been isolated. So all these things that we talked about before are probably happening in spades in the pandemic. And then they're pissed off about the pandemic. on top of the loneliness that they've experienced because of the pandemic, and probably on top of loneliness that they've experienced well before that. So that has certainly had a factor into it.
And they have nothing to do all day except for surf the internet and, you know, and chat with people who do not have their best interests at heart.
Right. So that's right. Exactly. So people get on these Facebook groups, and these Facebook groups are very potent. I'm on a, like, for some reason, I'll sort of divulge here a little bit. I'm on this Facebook group for backpacks. It's really weird. Like, I shouldn't even tell you that I follow a Facebook group for backpacks, but I do because I like backpacks and I bought a few backpacks. Anyway, the backpacks are the point. It has nothing to do with backpacks. There's a whole community of people that like backpacks. And in this case, it's a very nonpartisan, but it's a very supportive community. And you can get online and people have questions. And if I have a question about a backpack, 20 people are going to answer that question in the next half hour. And then there'll be dialogue happening back and forth. And then people meet up in the cities, right? So think about, that's an esoteric thing. Backpacks.
Yes.
But now combine that with something that really matters, like the election is stolen, but you still have that community there. It's very powerful.
Wow, that's amazing. High five, go for it.
Okay, so actually, you know, you talk about Facebook groups, and one of the papers of yours that I read was the Mapping White Identity Terrorism and Racially or Ethnically Motivated Violent Extremism, right?
Yeah.
And in that paper, you talk quite a bit about online platforms. You talk a lot about Twitter and how you found this group, I believe it was like 350,000 some individuals. I guess my question, what was that?
We pulled all the data from Twitter. So everything that we analyzed was on Twitter.
Wow.
Okay. So my question is, you've written this paper, you make recommendations in these papers, and you've written quite a few. Are you seeing adherence to your suggestions? Are companies making changes? Don't laugh, damn it. That's not the answer I want. Are companies making changes?
Yes,
is the government listening? There's nothing? Because this is a problem.
So I got to tell you, I mean, so I'm not the only one making these recommendations. A lot of people make these recommendations, and the recommendations I make are not always like mind-boggling new, right? There's things that have been out there. So I can't take credit for these. I'll tell you a story. Back in the day, I recommended, back in 2007, I recommended that the military in Iraq work to very carefully build relationships with the Iraqi people, yada, yada, yada. Anyway, a year later, I find myself in an office with General Petraeus as a 4-star in Iraq. And my family was just certain that his whole strategy was built around my report. And so finally I had the opportunity to give him a copy of my report, expecting him to say like, oh, Todd, tell me, you're the one that wrote that? That's amazing because I followed it. No, he never heard of it. So, you know, it's just, there's a lot of voices out there, and it's not on him for having never heard of it. I'm just one of many voices. And I feel like what oftentimes happens is we are all sort of chiming in on a similar vein. And so, of course, the platforms work to remove content off their platforms, right? That is in violation of their platform. So they have been doing that. And I know that there's been, based on our work on this report, a lot of recommendations about how to bring people out of extremism. And we've been able to make waves with that. But as a policy analyst, it's really rare to make a recommendation and then have someone come to you a week later or a month later or a year later and said, Todd, that recommendation made all the difference. It's just hard to do that.
Until their bottom lines are hurt enough, I feel like we are going to be in for a world of continued hurt. We need regulations. We need big, bold action because of the radicalization that continues. I have a couple more questions before we let you go. Hi-Fi, what were you going to say?
I just want to say that then the obvious answer is we need to get you a bigger megaphone, and we need to get you a bigger stick.
I'm here.
And just start whacking them over the head.
So my two things, and I'm sure Jim probably has something as well. And yes, we would like to have these conversations be ongoing. So if you can send us colleagues, please do. We do our show weekly, sometimes twice a week. Yes, I would like to know how, if there's a kind of a broad takeaway on how some of these folks that you interviewed got out of what we call the life, when we refer to gangs. And then also anything you can say from your reports on Russian propaganda, so the people out there who we know watch this show who still believe it's a hoax know that it ain't no hoax. Two-part question.
All right, two very different questions. Really quick, what we found is a lot of people got out, and they got out through support of other people. In some cases, it was other formers, other people who used to be in the group and then got out. Think of it like classic AA or something like that, working with former drug addicts. Others, it's family members and friends. But the point is, to me, the big point is there's hope. People do leave these groups. They leave these groups based on support from other folks. In some cases, a big thing is exposure to other people. Like it's not related to our study, but one of the leaders of the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville left that group in part because the documentarian was of Indian Pakistani descent. Wow. So, and the relationship he built with the documentarian led him to get out. And there's another guy, African-American, who has basically a cottage industry of getting guys out of white supremacist groups by building relationships with them. And at some point they say, holy crap, I can't be a white supremacist because I really like you, man.
I've seen that guy. It's amazing.
We need that guy on the show. So if you have a referral for us.
Yeah, I'll get you. I'll get him.
Thank you. Yeah.
So he's got amazing stories. And you know what? To me, the biggest thing is just you want to hate these people, and they've done shit that make you want to hate them.
Yeah.
And you can hate them, but if you treat them with hate, then they're never coming out. If you alienate them, if you disgust toward them, at some point, what we talk about is sort of extreme forgiveness. You have to be able to forgive these people for the things that they've done, and you need to be able to accept them back in. And this is you learn from the other conspiracy theory study you did. There's people with conspiracy theories, and some are anti-vax, and you're like, I can't stand anti-vaxxers because, they're perpetuating the pandemic, yada, yada. But if you treat them with hate, then they're never going to change. The only way you can get them to change is to be able to open up with them and give them a safe space.
To me, I think the thing is getting people to understand that the way people behave, right, which is to push all of their loved ones away, right? And to have cognitive dissonance if somebody tells you something that goes against the ideology of your group. If you fight that ideology directly, you just confirm everything that their cult, that their group tells you, that you're the enemy. What you're saying is just so important, right? This is all a flight to safety, right? The reason why so many of these people are financially hurting and they have life issues in general, is because it gives them this vulnerability, right?
Yeah.
And this is the same. It's the same thing in a different package.
Wow.
Now you guys asked about Russian propaganda. I mean, Russian propaganda is the real deal. I'm not sure what you want me to say here. They most definitely tried to interfere in the 2016 election. They disseminated some 10 million tweets. Their content on Facebook received over 300 million interactions. So yeah, they are definitely trying to influence things. What we're seeing right now in Ukraine is that they're not doing a very good job of it because things are going so poorly for them in Ukraine, and their invasion was so baseless that I think, at least from a Western audience, it's been hard. They've been sort of hard pressed to convince anybody, but they're real. And they would certainly like to be able to gravitate a certain percentage or a certain audience in the U.S. to their side to limit the ability of, say, Western sanctions or to limit Western support for Ukraine.
Yeah.
How much have you looked into Russian propaganda on the left? like infiltration, into the left, because for me there's a very, very sort of pernicious version of the Russian propaganda on the right that comes from the left and kind of acts as a third position to suck people into what are ultimately nihilistic ideologies. I'm just wondering how much you looked at that, because just anecdotally, a bunch of my lefty friends who were Bernie supporters suddenly got this vicious hatred of Hillary Clinton that was not natural, was not normal. It had been sort of like pounded into them through this propaganda. And I'm just curious if you'd looked into the systemic reasons for that.
Sure. I mean, I have no idea about your friends, and it's probably unlikely that Russian propaganda changed your friends' views that much. But Russia definitely for the 2016 election, they targeted both the left and the right. 2016, right. 2018, 2020, they're targeting the left and the right. With the right, an interesting approach about what Russia does is they take people's views, and I feel like they want to make them more extreme. Mm-hmm. They want to make conservatives not just fiscally conservative. They want the conservatives to hate immigrants. Mm-hmm. They don't want African Americans just to be like, connected, suspicious of sort of how the Western world engages with them. They want them to be isolationist and militaristic. And they wanted to turn Hillary Clinton supporters into Bernie supporters. Yeah. Right. So whatever position people are in, Russia wants to move them even further away. And in our view, that the whole goal of that, of course, that works for them a little bit on the election side. And they definitely wanted to support Trump over Clinton. That was clear. But even more than that, they want to make Americans hate each other.
Yeah. Right. Wow. I am so looking forward to continuing these conversations with your team. This was incredible. Just thank you for coming on our show and shedding light. I'm like taking notes mentally as fast as I can. Extreme forgiveness, extreming people to extreme positions. I've just learned so much.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you, sir.
It's been a pleasure.
Great to have you, man. Thanks again.
It really was.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
All right. Have a good Sunday.